Okay, we're going to apply a bit of what we've learned. Let's get this a little larger here. Good, good. And we're working in our sketchbooks, and our source material is up here. It's a barn in a field with haystacks around it, mountain in the background, some trees, fencing, pathway that leads up to the barn. We're not going to work edge to edge, so give yourself a little room here, away from the very edge of the picture plane. So we don't want to work edge to edge here. Right. And we'll start, I think it makes sense to start in the background. We'll drop down, and right now we're just laying out the composition, but we'll drop down the mountain in the background. Right, and then maybe a little of it rising again over on this side. And I think it makes sense to put in where the field meets this tree line here. Maybe this pathway that's leading out of the corner of the picture plane, running up. Wider as it gets closer to you, narrower as it moves away from you. Perhaps the bottom of this field here as it meets the fence, and this will be more or less our composition. Now we're likely to get some things off in this, so initially draw lightly. I'm drawing a little more darkly than you should be drawing at this point. And we have two applications here of the foundation forms of drawing. We have a cylinder on its side, which would be these haystacks. And then we have a cube here, which is taller than us, and so you can't see the top of it. So we can make application of those two things. This little scene does not exist. I just made it up based on, ideas like this and mark direction, methods of making marks. So this doesn't exist anywhere except, on that paper there. We'll start with the barn, and we'll come over to just the right of the pathway. And the mark that we're making first is the corner of the barn right there. We know from up here, since we can't see the top of it, we know that it goes down, down, up, up. So away from that corner that's closest to us, we can move marks going up, then we can move marks going down. Put in the other side of the barn over here. That will be the face of our barn, this face. At this point, we'll put in the top of the barn, and it is running up like that, back down like that. Top of side of the barn, we're running down slightly, then up slightly. I'm drawing through this as if it weren't there at this point. And alongside to this barn. Down slightly. Connect this. So let me strengthen up my marks here so that I am sure you can see them. Then we'll place this side of the barn in. So it's running down, and it's running down. Corner of it here, up again, down again slightly, up again slightly. That gives us the schematic of this barn structure here. At this point, I think it makes sense for us to get into the background a little bit. Here, we had this barn pretty well laid in. I mean, this is pretty much it, and all of this stuff is just detail work. We'll get to that a little later here in our drawing. But at this point, maybe we go into working with this tree that's right back in here, so we can push that out from the ground up. Although it's hidden where it hits the ground, it's hidden behind the barn. And then to get this foliage in the tree, we're going to do kind of a little squiggle mark in it. So I'm kind of rotating the pencil and moving it as rapidly as I can at the same time. A little overlap into that barn. More foliage. Foliage moves out really far away from the tree. It's a hardwood. That's always the case with a hardwood. Trunk of the tree is narrow. Foliage might move out 50 to 100 times the width of the trunk of the tree. In a hardwood. Let's put a couple of more areas of where that trunk might find its way in there. And I'm going to move this as rapidly as I can. We're working with clumps of foliage. We're not actually attempting to draw leaves in the tree. So we're working with clumps. Let's really give it some darks in the underside of the foliage. Got this pencil on its side so that I can leave a lot of graphite on the paper quickly. It may help you to think clouds or something like that. We're working with large clumps of foliage here. I'm going to turn the pencil over to sort of a detail hold, and basically I'm just rocking the pencil a little bit so that I get quickly a little bit of impression of leaves. I'm not drawing every leaf, but if I start the viewer down that path of thinking that they're looking at leaves, they'll think they're looking at leaves. It's, that works. Just enough to give it some variety of texture in here. Strengthen up this trunk a little bit. So, I think that's working pretty well. We could spend a lot of time in this, but we don't want to. Top of my picture plane here, so I'm cutting up there. I don't want to go all the way to the edge of the picture plane up there, so cutting off. And I think it makes sense for us to work with this mountain space back in here now. This little drawing depends a lot on mark direction. So you got marks that are climbing the mountain. I'm ignoring this tree line in the front here because it's such a darker value. I can put it in later. And you got marks that are moving in a direction that establishes the face of the mountain. Switch our directions from time to time. Kind of a plateau up there. This entire drawing, to a large extent, really does depend on the direction of mark making. Give it a little bit of value. Let's give it a little bit of value since I'm going to leave the sky, the white of the paper, so we'll give this, the entire thing, some value. I mean, it could stand to be a little darker right in there, maybe. Kind of climbing up that mountain with our marks. I'm a background player in this whole thing. You know, we don't need to wrestle with it too much. And then back here, since this seems to be in the far distance, we're just going to give it a back and forth value. This one has value. Hills as they roll over here. Alright, I think at this point we could probably get in here and deal with a few of these trees that are back in here. Other little trees, and we have a tree line that is right here, darker than the value of the mountain behind it. So I'm going to try to give this a pretty dark, heavy approach to this. Drawing's function on dark light, dark light, dark light. So you have to get that established, and maybe a few trucks hidden back in there. And it's the value of this that is important. And we've got this little evergreen that's growing this little lower where it meets the ground down here. Evergreens, in general, are a little tighter. The foliage is a little tighter to the trunk. And in a fir like this, it never really spreads very far away from the trunk. We have another tree back in here behind the building, and we want this very dark value. We're going to avoid the building. Very irregular shape to the outside of this, just like we had an irregular shape to the outside of all of this up here. Takes care of a bit of that side of the drawing. Have a few other little firs over here along this little foreground of the field that we established. So we'll put a few more little firs in. Little one is getting a start here. Probably planted by birds along that fence line. You see these things often along the fence line. A little taller one here. Keeping this pretty tight to the truck line. A little more drama up here in this tree. I'm not real happy with it yet. That's pretty good. Okay, we can at this point put in this fence line that's back in here. So it's got a few little up and down marks. Let's make them as heavy as we can make them. They get a little bit taller as they come towards us. Put in the slats in between them. A little fence line back in there. No reason for us not to establish this little fence line running something like that. So tall, little shorter, little shorter, and little shorter, little shorter, shorter, shorter. Let's get those laid in. And we'll put in the top of that, running back, bottom, running back in space. Automatically kind of establishes three-dimensional space moving back into the picture plane. This has a bit of a value back here behind the fence, and not a lot of articulation to it, it's just a value. So we'll lay in something of a value back in there. Establish this a little bit harder. All right, we're moving, into our foreground at this point. So makes sense, I think, at this point to get back to this barn. Have a little window up in here, squarish mark we want to make. Have a little window here, have another squarish mark we want to make. This one has a couple of little shutters out from it. Now the opening of the barn on the front here. Following these directions, the two sides of it are just up and down, up and down. And dark, it's in shadow. Our barn doesn't have any electricity, so kind of deep dark in there. Could leave a little bit of light getting in from out here if you want. Corner of the barn. Then down this side, we've got another little window. Guess that's what it is. At the time I made the mark, I just made a mark. And two openings on this side out here, so up and down. 2 openings. So you can drive a tractor in there, I guess. And we'll establish a arc value for that. Good. And we'll deal with some cast shadows. There will be a cast shadow running along here. A little bit of a shadow right here. Maybe something of a shadow along there. Something of a shadow here. Something of a shadow running along here. Something of a shadow along here. We'd be ready at this point to pull in some slats, kind of slat work in here, up and down, up and down, up and down, clapboard. I think clapboard runs in the other direction, but up and down slat work. This shadow here is probably at this point not strong enough in either. I don't think this one is either, so I'm going to strengthen them a little bit. Let's run this up and down while I make the shadow here. Strengthen that up a little bit. Starting to get, something of the feeling of a barn. Has a tin roof on it, and so we got directions that move in this diagonal here, just like the roof line. Diagonal again. And we are beginning to get a good feeling for something that I think is going to pass as a rickety old barn. Good, we're all together. Okay. Let's get into, and before we deal with this field, that can be done pretty quickly. Let's get into the use of the other formal object here, which is the cylinder on its side. Cylinder on its side, we've always started with an ellipse, standing ellipse. So you'll start that way again, standing ellipse, and its side, side, and the completion of it back here. One. Got another one over here. These are big bales of hay. Another one back here, slightly behind that one, so light quality in this is sort of invented because it didn't invent the whole thing. So But the face of these bales of hay really very, very dark. And then this is our shadowed side of the drawing, so it's going to be some shadow falling up around them a little bit like that. Dark down here at the bottom. And it's got a cast shadow out from it. Same thing here. Up a little bit. Getting dark down here at the bottom. And slightly less dark as it moves up the bale of hay. Cast shadow. Dark where it makes the connection. And maybe slightly lighter as it moves away. Same thing here, avoiding that foreground bale of hay. Shadow, cast shadow. Alright, what about all this? Let's not go into all that grass yet. Let's cast some shadows out from this fence. Strong shadows. Lay them down on the diagonal. Maybe a shadow from that tree. It'll just place them on in space. Make them feel like, you know, they have real effect and they have a sun back in here. To push this side of the barn up a little bit, I'll go back in here and give this a deeper value because it'll push this up if this area around it's a little bit darker. Do that. See how it pushes that barn back up to you by putting that darker value back in behind it. All of this, the field is Mark making that it's kind of at the diagonal and then it shifts its direction over and over and over again. We're not going to illustrate this, couldn't do it if I wanted to, I don't guess, but so we're making marks that have lots and lots of different directions. They don't need to be too long, but they need to shift in direction frequently. And that is where marked direction can indicate something that's laying down or standing up. Lots of variety in here. We're going to have to avoid these areas that are highlights in these bales of hay. But lots of variety. Quick, quick, quick. Change of direction, change of direction, change of direction. Change of direction, change of direction. Shifting direction constantly, constantly, constantly. little time spent in here so that we get a value to all of this grassy area. So a little time spent with it, but shifting those marks, those directions of those marks constantly, constantly, constantly. The reason I want to establish something of a value to this grassy area is that I want this to have some impact. The light that's hitting these 3 bales of hay. So and you can play around with this for a long time if you wanted to. Yeah, I think we're getting something good here. So. A little cast shadow out from our long grass onto the pathway here. And we have cast shadow from the barn itself running out like this. Cast shadow. Alright, apart from you tinkering with this a little bit and giving it whatever amount of finish that you desire in it, that is pretty much it for barn and bales of hay in a landscape. Give it some hard variety in here from time to time. Good, I think. And you can, when you have it to the point that you like it,